Where did the idea for unicorns come from? And what's the upcoming Jewish holiday all about? This is Rabbi Yossi Madvig, and you're listening to Jews Did It First. Hey everyone, sorry for the delay. One of these days I'll get my act together, but I've got a great show for today. And also, I heard that iTunes is closing down, and so the podcast thing isn't going to be available anymore. That's what I heard. I'm not sure if that's true. That really sucks. But luckily for you, you can also grab this on Google Play and Stitcher. And of course, you can go to the website, jewisoswego.org/Jews Did It First. Look it up. You can Google it. You'll find it. Just Google Jews Did It First and don't worry about it. But it's Jewish, like the religion, Oswego, like the city, OSWEGO.org/Jews Did It First, and you can catch the episodes there. So we're going to take a little journey through history and discover what is with the unicorn. Anyone who's into horses, like my sister-in-law is really into horses. One of my sons really loves horseback riding. Always are fascinated by the unicorn as well. Even to this day, it persists as a very interesting concept that people like to think about. It's sort of this wondrous fantasy, mythological being of the horse or goat with one horn. And going back even just to the Middle Ages or the Renaissance period in particular, it's viewed as having these healing properties. It's supposed to be very rare and only captured by a virgin, and the horn is supposed to be able to, heal the sick and clean poisoned water and all this sort of stuff. So it's quite an interesting concept, and it pops up in all sorts of stories even today as a mythical creature. So that's for the Renaissance period. Now, if you go further back into ancient Greek civilization, you don't find it in mythology, interestingly enough. Where do you find it? In accounts of natural history. As far as the Greeks were concerned, this is not a mythological creature. The unicorn is a very real animal. They were believed to have lived in India. India, for the Greeks, was like this far off, fantastical place. And it's mentioned, I think the oldest mention of it is in, I'm probably going to butcher this name, but that's okay. Ctesias. Actually, I could just, if I click on it here, I bet I can find a good not translation. What's it called? What's that word called when you phonetic sounding here? Ctesias, maybe, or Ctesias, whatever. It doesn't matter. So he worked in the royal court of Archimedes, or not? Sorry, Artaxerxes. Archimedes of Artaxerxes II. So we're placing him at around 400 BCE. Okay, which is a long time ago, right? That's about 2,400 years ago, and he mentions it in his book Indica, which is on India. He mentions all these fantastical things, and one of the things that he mentions over there is this unicorn with, this horse. How does he describe it? He describes it as a what do you call it? It's like a wild ass, like some donkey type thing, fleet of foot, which I assume means that it's either very fast or can fly, and having a horn a cubit and a half, which is roughly, we'll say 2 feet, maybe 30 inches. And it's colored white, red, and black. Okay, very interesting. This is his account of the unicorn, which he believes is in India, which it's very interesting that it's in India, by the way, because if you listen to another podcast that I did a while back on Eastern religions, we find that the concept of Eastern religions, we believe, is rooted in Abraham, and that he sent. It says that he sent his sons, or he sent people east, and this is where they sort of brought the occult and different Kabbalistic things with them, and various knowledge of certain things with them from Abraham himself. That's for, you can look at that podcast over there on meditation and or reincarnation in Eastern religions and so on. But we're going to go even further back in the past, and that is with not the Inca, the Indus Valley civilization, which is pretty far back, right? I mean, we're talking around the time about 3,300 years ago is the earliest that we have in the Indus Valley civilization, but it goes all the way up until no, sorry, not 3,000 years ago, 33 BCE. So that's 5,000 years ago, all the way up until 1300 BCE. But it has its big time when the Indus Valley civilization was around. This is, by the way, northwestern regions of South Asia. It was really going from 2600, so we're talking about 4,500 or 4,600 years ago, until about 1900 BCE, which is about 4,000 years ago. So it really, along with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, was really booming at that time. So that's also an interesting factor to note, that it would be mentioned in the Indus Valley, which is that South Asia, area of North Africa, West Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, through western and northwestern part of India. This whole area where the Jews this is part of where the Jews were born, and as we're going to see, Jews did it first. Okay, I need to admit here that I am going to fudge a little bit the concept of Jews did it first. And I've said this in the past, that it doesn't necessarily mean we were the first ones that ever did it in the history of the universe, but rather just first in the sense of we take these things for granted in our modern culture. Like we said, it was very big in the Renaissance period and certainly in modern fantasy, but just that Jews did it first, we did it before that happened. And the reason I'm fudging that a little bit is because in the Indus Valley, like I mentioned, you have these seals with the one-horned animal. That is a good 1,000 years before the giving of the Torah, before the Jewish people there. So we're talking about perhaps in the times of Abraham or a little before. And the inscriptions on these tablets from the Indus Valley, there is some dispute about it. I mean, first of all, we notice that there's no one-horned animals walking around, so where did these animals go? What's going on over here? And it seems to be one of the most common ones that we find in these excavation sites. So it was so common, and yet all of a sudden the animal just disappears. And there's no fossil record of it. There's nothing. I mean, I understand fossils take longer, but I'm saying there's no bones, no nothing. Where did this animal just disappear to? So there's actually a couple of disagreements here. Some say that actually the animal didn't exist. It was just it's sort of a mythological creature, even according to them. And we don't know what these tablets are for. We don't even know what they called the animal. We may never even know that at all. This could be just some mythical representation. It seems to be made up of different parts. The analysts who look at these things say that part of it seems to be like how they represent an ox. Another part seems to be how they represent an antelope, based on the ears and the tail and so on. So it's like this composite animal that nobody really knows what's going on with it. So it could be that even in the Incas, in the Indus Valley civilization, it wasn't even real. It's just this is a made up thing that they're drawing. That could be. There is an opinion that says it's made profile and the artist is meant to have like as if one horn was behind the other. I don't really agree with that. That seems to be. I mean, I'm no archaeologist or anything, but just looking at the picture, I see four legs. So if I see four legs, even though it's profile, I would assume to see that I'd see two horns as well. So, not really sure what's going on with this animal. It's highly debated. However, however, when it comes to the unicorn in Jewish literature, it's much clearer. And that's where we're going to go now. So, in the Bible, in the Torah, when the Jewish people are told to build the tabernacle, the Mishkan, their portable temple in the desert, they're told to use tachash skins. And this you can find in Exodus chapter 25, chapter 37. Excuse me. And they are told to use this tachash, and there's only one problem. We don't know what a tachash is. What is a tachash animal? So there is actually a little bit of a debate. There are two different guys, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nehemiah, who say it was just actually some kind of dye that was used. But those are two random guys. Well, they're not random. They're very holy Jews, very learned rabbis. But all the other rabbis, the sages of the Talmud, and specifically talking about the Jerusalem Talmud here, which was codified about 200 CE, say that it was some kind of kosher animal. And it lived in the wilderness. All right, that's all we got over there. Well, if you go into the Babylonian Talmud, which is a few hundred years later than that, it concurs with that opinion of the rabbis that it was this kind of animal. And there is a debate. I will say that there is a debate, but not a debate about whether or not it's real or how many horns it really has and so on and so forth. There's the bigger debate of whether or not it was kosher or non-kosher. And even if it is kosher, because we have to use it for building the tabernacle, the Mishkan, what kind of animal was it? Was it a domesticated animal, or was it a wild animal? So that's the main dispute over there. And I want to take you to the Talmud. This is actually in the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Shabbat, page 28. A whole big discussion over there about this tachash. So let me pull this up for you here. All right, so what is it? It says in the Talmud, as I just lost my spot, they go back and forth whether it's kosher, whether it's not kosher, yada, 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 yada. And they translate it, and we see this in the Targum, in the Aramaic translation in the Bible as well, the Targum Yonason and so on, that what is the tachash? So they say it's like a tala elon, which is a wild animal. But the important thing about the tala elon is that it is a multicolored animal. Okay, so now we've already brought us into that realm that everyone seems to agree in sort of modern mythology that unicorns or Pegasus, whatever, it is this, it does have this concept of multicolored. Usually rainbows go along with it. So where does that come from? Straight from Judaism. It is a multicolored animal. Okay, that's one thing, and that's why it's translated in the Aramaic as a what's the word here? Sasguna. It's called a sasguna. Now, the way that it writes that actually is reminiscent of the word sus, which is like a horse, but the way that they describe it as it's sas begavinan, that it is it rejoices in its colors. And this multicolored animal has other characteristics as well. As if you go on, again, they have this whole discussion: is it pure? Is it impure? Yada yada yada. You get onto the next page, 28b, and there is another interesting fact that we find out about this tachash. Not only is it multicolored, but we find that Rabbi Elah said that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said that Reb Meir used to say, so Rabbi Meir, famous rabbi in the Talmud, that the Tachash, and this is going to answer two questions at once. One, a characteristic, and two, where is it? He says the Tachash existed in the days of Moses. It was a creature unto itself, and the sages couldn't determine whether it was undomesticated or domesticated, and it had a single horn on its forehead. And the Tachash happened to come to Moses for the moment, for temporarily, meaning while the tabernacle was being built, and he made the covering for the tabernacle, and then it was suppressed, it was hidden, no longer found. So some say that, interestingly enough, the fact that it had a single horn, some say that the ox that Adam the first man, used was a single-horned ox. And I find that interesting because, like we said before about the Indus Valley seals with the unicorn on it, that it has some characteristics of an ox. Found that interesting. But that's actually a debate whether it did have a horn, didn't have a horn, whatever. I'm not going to get into that now. What's interesting here is that, like I said, answers two questions. So we know three things about this animal that actually answer a lot of our questions, all found in Judaism, right? Question number one, what did it look like? Okay, so it seems to be this this animal that's multicolored. And like we looked at before, in the Greek version, it says that it did have different colors. It was red and black and white and so on. So that's interesting. It was multicolored. We also know from our sources it had one horn. Okay, so we've got our one horn there. Great. Where is it now? That's a big question, right? Well, as we read in the Talmud, it says that it came for that moment and then it was gone. Now, some say that means it literally was created by God just for that moment in the wilderness. They made the tabernacle and then it became extinct. However, there are opinions that also say that no, it was brought out. We don't find this in the wilderness, in the desert. So it was brought out to Moses. Some of the Tachash came to Moses for that time, and then he made the Tachash skins, and then gone. So it could be that yes, they're found over in the Indus Valley region. They came to Moses for that time, and then gone. Now, does it mean that they went back, or does it mean that they were completely wiped off? They're completely gone. And I think that it's important to note, again, we so far haven't found any remains of such an animal. So it could be that it was just completely wiped off the face of the earth by God, just as if it never existed. It was there for that moment. Otherwise, we would expect to find some remains. Now, it could be that we will find remains in the future, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something that the Rebbe said about the uniqueness of the Tachash, of this unicorn. And he says that the uniqueness of the Tachash is that it's the only creation that was used exclusively for a holy purpose. Now, this is if we're going according to this idea that's mentioned in the Talmud, that it was brought to Moses just for this moment, for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle, and then it was gone. So it came about only to be used for a holy purpose. And so the Tachash illustrates to us that the ultimate purpose for all of creation is to be used in the service of God. And this will be fully realized in the building of the third temple, made happen speedily in our days. So we don't see any evidence of a single horned animal before this time. I'm talking physical remains. We don't find after this time. It seems to be this temporary blip in history with no remains, with the exception of this mention of using it for Tachash skins for the tabernacle. So the unicorn, while quite elusive, we could at least partially say Jews did it first. Just want to give a brief rundown on the holiday that's coming up on Sunday, the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which commemorates the giving of the Torah. Actually, officially, it doesn't have anything to do with the giving of the Torah, because the Torah says you should count 7 weeks after Passover, and after that you make a holiday. So it just, quote unquote, happens to be that after that 7 weeks they made a holiday, and that 7 weeks is when the Torah was given. But officially, it's not connected in the Torah itself. But traditionally, we say, obviously, that it happened at that exact time for a specific reason. Nothing is by chance. Nothing is by coincidence. The common saying, coincidence is just an 11-letter name of God. So, what is it all about? The giving of the Torah, obviously, is when the Jewish people really came into their own. Now we had a divine mission, a divine plan. Before, God says, okay, I'm taking you out of Egypt, and that's great. He loves us. He takes us out of Egypt. We were slaves. Now we're not slaves. Fantastic. But what do we do? What are we supposed to do with our lives? The difference between liberty and freedom. Freedom is you just do. You're free. Great. You do whatever you want. You have freedom. But liberty is a whole different thing. So liberty is freedom, but within a construct. You have the liberty to do this and that. Given the certain constraints of what you are allowed to do, you have complete freedom within that framework. So you have liberty. I'm giving you the liberty to do X, Y, and Z. So we have that concept. So Passover was when we became free, and Shavuot is when we gained liberty. And we have the freedom to act within certain constraints of how God wants us to behave in the world. He gave us the Torah. What is the Torah? The Torah is divine will and wisdom in the world. A guide of how to live, of who we are, somewhat of our history, and how God expects us to behave with each other, towards Him, towards the world. And this is what we're celebrating, our birth as a people with a mission, with a purpose in the world, to serve God, to be a light to the nations. And it is this Torah that we learn every day and we apply every day. Many people say, oh, the Torah doesn't apply anymore. It's because it's too difficult, and there's no way to keep the laws, etc., etc. I've noticed that the people who say that are the people who don't keep the laws. Yes, it's hard. Not all the laws apply right now because we don't have a certain system of monarchy and the temple and so on and so forth. But the laws that do apply still apply. And there are thousands upon thousands of people who do them every day. And so I encourage you to find a place this Shavuot on Sunday, go to your local synagogue, hear the 10 Commandments being read aloud, and make a commitment to do something better for God. One thing, whether it's something that you do normally, you want to do it better. Maybe you want to give more charity. You already give charity, but you want to give more charity. Maybe you light Friday night candles every now and then. Well, try lighting them every week. You've heard of tefillin? The black straps that we put on, the men put on. Put on tefillin once a week, once a day, something. Do something for God. Maybe start keeping kosher, something. Some customs that we do other than hearing the 10 Commandments, why it's a good idea to go to the synagogue, is it's customary to have a dairy kiddush. We have a little dairy lunch. It's customary to eat dairy foods on Shavuot. And the reason is, actually, there's a lot of reasons given. I'm not going to go into. A couple of reasons are that chalav, the word for dairy, has a numerical value. All the letters have a numerical value. So the word dairy, chalav, has a numerical value of 40, representing the 40 days and 40 nights that Moses was on the mountain receiving the Torah. There's some more practical reasons that now that they got the Torah, all their dishes were not kosher because of the meat. So they had the slaughtering rules that they now had to abide by, and so they couldn't have meat. So what does that mean? That they could have all their dishes, their meat dishes are no longer kosher, so they can have dairy. So they eat dairy, and there's many other reasons given. But in any event, it's good. Go have some ice cream, some cheesecake, hear the 10 Commandments, commit yourself to do at least one thing to connect to God in a deeper, more meaningful way. And we'll see how that goes. And next time, I hope to have a great show for you as well. Hopefully next week, we'll see how it goes. Please let me know also how that goes. If you went, you heard the Aseret Adibros, you heard the 10 Commandments, you committed yourself just a little bit closer to God. Please let me know how that goes. Write back to me. You can contact me, rabbi@jewishoswego.org, or you can, when you go onto the website for the podcast, if you're there at jewishoswego.org/Jews Did It First, there should be a little contact us button. You can email me that way. You can contact me on Facebook, on the page Jews Did It First, or on Twitter at Oswego Rabbi. Lots of ways to get a hold of me. I'd love to hear from you, and love to hear some ideas for shows. I've got a whole bunch of ideas lined up, just haven't gotten to them, about doing the research, etc. And love to hear from you. Chag Sameach. Have a happy, wonderful holiday. And as we say, you should you should receive the Torah with joy and with inwardness. L'chaim, l'chaim.